I stared at the text message on my phone screen, reading it for the third time while sitting in my corner office on the 42nd floor of the Salesforce Tower in San Francisco. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the Bay Bridge stretching across the water, cargo ships moving slowly toward the port of Oakland, and the afternoon fog beginning to roll in from the Pacific. It was a view that cost my company $50,000 per month in rent, but it was worth every penny for the sense of perspective it provided during moments like this. The text had arrived at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, interrupting a board meeting where we'd been discussing the final details of our acquisition of a competing firm for $340 million. I'd excused myself from the conference room full of investment bankers and corporate lawyers to read what I'd assumed would be a routine message from my father. Instead, I'd found this bombshell that revealed just how completely my family misunderstood both our financial situation and my role in maintaining it. Market crashed. You're on your own now. The irony was so profound it was almost funny. For the past 5 years, I had been secretly funding what my father believed was his carefully managed trust fund, watching him take credit for investment decisions I'd been making through intermediaries, listening to him lecture me about financial responsibility while I quietly prevented our family from falling into bankruptcy. I picked up my office phone and dialed the private number for Marcus Chin, my personal banker at Wells Fargo Private Wealth Management. Marcus had been handling my accounts for 3 years, ever since my company Avalon Digital had crossed the billion-dollar valuation threshold and I'd needed more sophisticated financial services. Elena, Marcus answered on the first ring, his voice carrying the polished professionalism that came with managing portfolios worth 9 figures. I saw the market volatility today. I hope you're not concerned about your positions. Your diversification strategy has protected you quite well. Actually, Marcus, I'm calling about a different matter, I said, settling back in my leather chair. I need you to send my father the complete account statements for the Vasquez Family Trust. The real statements, showing all contributions and their sources for the past 5 years. There was a brief pause as Marcus accessed the account information on his computer. Ah, you mean the statements showing that you've contributed $14.2 million over the past 5 years, representing 89% of the trust's current value? Exactly those statements. Elena, are you sure about this? You've been very specific about maintaining confidentiality regarding your contributions. This would reveal your involvement completely. I looked at my father's text message again, particularly the phrase "you're on your own now," and made my decision. I'm absolutely certain. Please send them today, along with a detailed breakdown of how the trust has been funded and managed. Of course, should I include the documentation showing that you've been the beneficial owner of the investment accounts that your father believes he's been managing? Include everything, Marcus. It's time for full transparency. After I hung up, I sat in my office for several minutes, considering the conversation that would inevitably follow. My father, Roberto Vasquez, had no idea that his daughter, the one he considered the family disappointment, was the CEO and founder of Avalon Digital, a cloud computing and data analytics company that had revolutionized how Fortune 500 companies managed their digital infrastructure. The deception hadn't been malicious. It had been protective. 5 years ago, when I'd started Avalon Digital with $50,000 I'd saved from freelance programming jobs, my family had been facing financial ruin. Dad's restaurant business had been failing, Mom's medical bills from her cancer treatment had been astronomical, and my younger brother Diego's college expenses were draining what remained of their savings. Rather than reveal my growing success and deal with their inevitable questions, demands, and attempts to manage my business decisions, I'd created a complex web of shell companies and intermediaries. Through these entities, I'd quietly paid off their debts, funded Diego's education, covered Mom's medical expenses, and most significantly, rebuilt the family trust fund that Dad had been forced to liquidate during their financial crisis. For 5 years, I'd let him believe he was a brilliant investor who'd recovered from near bankruptcy through smart market decisions. I'd watched him give financial advice to relatives at family gatherings, seen him take credit for investment returns that were actually the result of my carefully managed contributions, and listened to him lecture me about responsibility and planning for the future. The irony had become almost unbearable, especially as Avalon Digital had grown from a startup into one of the most valuable private companies in Silicon Valley. We employed over 1,200 people, managed cloud infrastructure for 60% of the Fortune 100, and were preparing for an IPO that would value the company at over $8 billion. Yet to my family, I was still Elena, the computer programmer who worked from home and didn't seem to have any clear career direction. My phone buzzed with a call from Diego. At 26, my brother was finishing his MBA at Wharton, funded entirely by what he believed was family money but was actually my direct financial support channeled through the trust. Elena, Diego's voice was anxious. Did you get Dad's text about the trust fund? I did, I said calmly. What's your take on the situation? I'm freaking out, honestly. That trust fund has been paying for my MBA, and I've got 6 months left before graduation. If it's really gone, I don't know how I'm going to finish school. Dad seemed so confident about his investment strategy, but maybe he was taking too many risks. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of maintaining this elaborate fiction. Diego, don't worry about your education funding. It's going to be fine. How can you be so calm about this? Elena, this affects you too. I know you've been depending on that trust fund as a safety net. If only he knew. The safety net he was referring to was actually a tiny fraction of my personal wealth. The trust fund that Dad thought was worth $2.3 million was pocket change compared to my stake in Avalon Digital, which was currently valued at $1.8 billion. Things have a way of working out, I said diplomatically. Just focus on your studies. But Elena, you don't understand the bigger picture. Dad's been so proud of rebuilding that trust fund after the restaurant failed. He's been telling everyone about his investment success. If people find out he lost it all again. Diego, I need to ask you something and I want you to think carefully before answering. What do you actually know about how that trust fund was rebuilt? There was a pause. Dad said he made some smart investments in tech stocks and real estate. He's been really secretive about the details, but the quarterly statements showed steady growth. Why do you ask? Just curious about his investment strategy, I said, knowing that within a few hours, Diego would have very different information about those smart investments. After we hung up, I turned back to my computer and pulled up the financial dashboard that tracked all my various holdings and investments. The numbers were staggering even to me. Avalon Digital was worth $8.2 billion based on our most recent private valuation. My personal real estate portfolio included properties in San Francisco, Palo Alto, Manhattan, and London worth a combined $47 million. My investment accounts held another $230 million in diversified assets. Yet my family thought I was struggling financially because I drove a 5-year-old Honda Civic and lived in what they believed was a modest apartment in San Francisco. In reality, the apartment was a 3,000-square-foot penthouse loft that I'd bought for $4.2 million, but I'd never corrected their assumptions about my living situation. The deception had started small and grown increasingly complex over time. When Avalon Digital had landed its first major client, Netflix, for a $12 million cloud infrastructure project, I couldn't share the news because my family would have asked too many questions about how a freelance programmer had suddenly landed such a massive contract. When we'd raised our series of funding of $50 million, I'd wanted to celebrate with my family, but I knew they'd become involved in ways that would complicate both my business and our relationships. So I'd stayed quiet and continued letting them believe I was just getting by. When Avalon Digital had gone from startup to unicorn status with a $1 billion valuation, the secret had become so large that revealing it seemed impossible. How do you tell your family that you've been secretly wealthy for years while watching them worry about money? The solution had been to quietly solve their financial problems without taking credit. When Dad's restaurant had been failing, I'd arranged for several of my corporate clients to hold private events there, paying premium rates that kept the business afloat until he could sell it profitably. When Mom needed expensive cancer treatments, I'd anonymously covered the costs through a charitable foundation I'd established. When Diego needed college funding, I'd rebuilt the family trust through contributions that appeared to come from Dad's investment success. It had worked perfectly until today, when actual market volatility had spooked Dad into believing he'd lost money that had never really been his to lose. My assistant, Jennifer, knocked on my office door and entered with a concerned expression. "Elena, your father called the main line looking for you. He seemed quite upset. Should I put him through?" "Not yet," I said. "He should be receiving some important documents from our bank within the next hour. Let's wait until after he's had a chance to review those." Jennifer nodded and left, but I could tell she was curious about the family drama that was apparently unfolding. Very few people at Avalon Digital knew anything about my personal life. I'd maintained strict separation between my professional success and my family relationships, partly for privacy and partly to avoid the complications that would inevitably arise if my employees knew their CEO was dealing with complex family financial dynamics. Around 4:30 p.m., my phone started ringing. The caller ID showed Dad, and I knew the bank documents had arrived. Elena, Dad's voice was confused and shaky. I just received some very strange paperwork from Wells Fargo. Can you explain to me why these account statements show your name as the primary contributor to our family trust? Because I have been the primary contributor for the past 5 years, I said simply. That's impossible. Elena, you're a freelance programmer. You work from home. How could you have contributed millions of dollars to anything? I took a deep breath, knowing that the next few minutes would fundamentally change our family dynamics forever. Dad, I need to tell you something that's going to be difficult to believe. I'm not a freelance programmer. I haven't been for 5 years. What do you mean? I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Avalon Digital. We provide cloud computing and data analytics services to major corporations. The company is currently valued at over $8 billion. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds. $8 billion? Dad's voice was barely a whisper. $8 billion. Elena, this isn't funny. If you're trying to make me feel better about losing the trust fund. Dad, you didn't lose the trust fund. There was no market crash affecting our accounts. You received a standard volatility alert from your investment platform and panicked. The money is still there, plus the additional $400,000 I contributed last month. I could hear him shuffling through papers, presumably looking at the bank statements Marcus had sent. These documents show contributions from something called Avalon Holdings LLC, Dad said slowly. Are you telling me you own this company? Avalon Holdings is one of my investment entities. I've been funding the trust through various LLCs and intermediaries to maintain privacy. Privacy from what? Privacy from exactly this conversation, I said gently. Dad, for 5 years you've been taking credit for investment returns that were actually my direct contributions. You've been giving financial advice to relatives based on success that was really my success. I didn't want to embarrass you by revealing that your brilliant investing was actually your daughter's money. Another long silence. Elena, if this is true, if you really own $1 billion company, why do you live in that tiny apartment? Why do you drive that old car? Why don't you travel or buy expensive things? The apartment isn't tiny. It's a 3,000 square foot penthouse in Soma that I bought for $4.2 million. I drive the Honda because it's reliable and doesn't attract attention. And I do travel extensively, just for business. $4 million? Dad's voice cracked. Elena, none of this makes sense. When did this happen? How did this happen? It started 5 years ago when I founded Avalon Digital. We developed breakthrough technology for managing cloud infrastructure at scale. Our first major client was Netflix, then Google, then Amazon. The company grew rapidly and we raised increasingly large rounds of venture capital funding. I could hear Mom's voice in the background, asking Dad what was happening. Your mother wants to know what's going on, Dad said. Put me on speakerphone. Elena. Mom's voice came through clearly. Your father is saying impossible things about you owning a company worth billions of dollars. It's not impossible, Mom. It's true. I founded Avalon Digital 5 years ago, and it's become one of the most valuable private technology companies in the country. But honey, you work from home on your computer. You've never mentioned having employees or offices or clients. I have 1,200 employees across offices in San Francisco, Austin, Boston, and London. Our clients include most of the Fortune 100. We manage the cloud infrastructure that runs about 40% of the internet traffic in North America. This is insane, Diego's voice joined the conversation. Apparently he'd arrived at our parents' house. Elena, are you seriously telling us you've been secretly running $1 billion company for 5 years? $8.2 billion as of our most recent valuation, I corrected. And yes, I've been keeping it secret to protect both the business and our family relationships. But why? Mom asked, her voice filled with hurt. Why would you keep something so wonderful secret from us? I'd been dreading this question, but I knew I had to answer honestly. Because every time I've tried to share professional successes with this family, they've been minimized or dismissed. When I graduated summa cum laude from Stanford, Dad said it was nice but not practical. When I landed my first major consulting contract, you said it sounded temporary and unreliable. So I stopped sharing. But Elena, Diego said, we would have been proud of you. We would have celebrated your success. Would you have? Or would you have tried to manage my business decisions, questioned my strategies, and treated me like I was still a child who needed guidance? The phone went quiet as they considered this. You've been funding everything, Dad said slowly, understanding dawning in his voice. The trust fund, Diego's education, your mother's medical bills. Elena, how much money have you spent on this family? I pulled up the detailed spreadsheet I'd been maintaining. Including the trust fund contributions, medical expenses, education costs, and various other support, approximately $18.7 million over the past 5 years. $18 million, Mom whispered. And you never said anything, Diego added. You let us think Dad was this brilliant investor who'd recovered from bankruptcy through smart decisions. I let Dad maintain his dignity while ensuring our family was financially secure, I said. I thought it was the right approach. Elena, Dad's voice was thick with emotion, I feel like a fraud. I've been taking credit for your generosity for years. You're not a fraud, Dad. You made the best decisions you could with the information you had. I just made sure those decisions worked out better than they might have otherwise. My office phone rang and I saw it was Jennifer calling from the reception desk. Elena, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there are some reporters here from TechCrunch and the Wall Street Journal. They're asking about Avalon Digital's IPO timeline and want to schedule interviews with you. I muted my personal phone and spoke to Jennifer. Tell them I'll have a statement tomorrow. No interviews today. When I unmuted the call with my family, Mom was speaking. Don't understand why reporters would be calling about Elena's company. Because we're preparing to go public, I said. Avalon Digital will probably IPO within the next 6 months. The media has been speculating about our plans. Going public means selling stock to regular investors, Diego said, his MBA training kicking in. Elena, if the company is worth $8 billion and you're the founder. I own 22% of the company, I said. On paper, my stake would be worth approximately $1.8 billion after an IPO. $1.8 billion, Dad repeated slowly. Elena, you're going to be a billionaire. On paper, yes. Most of that wealth would remain tied up in company stock. But you'd still be a billionaire, Carmen said. Our Elena would be one of the wealthiest women in technology. The weight of this revelation was clearly hitting them in waves. I could hear them talking among themselves, trying to process the magnitude of what they'd learned. Elena, Mom said finally, I need to ask you something important. With all this success, all this wealth, all this responsibility, are you happy? Are you fulfilled? It was the same question Sarah's mother had asked in my previous story, and it deserved the same honest consideration. Building Avalon Digital has been the most challenging and rewarding experience of my life, I said. I love solving complex technical problems, I'm passionate about the team we've built, and I believe our technology makes the internet more reliable and efficient for everyone. But keeping it secret from you has been incredibly lonely. Why reveal it now? Dad asked. You could have continued the deception indefinitely. I smiled, looking at his text message still displayed on my phone. Because you gave me the perfect opening. You're on your own now, said to someone who's been financially supporting the entire family for 5 years. The irony was too perfect to ignore. Dad, Diego said, laughing despite everything, you literally told Elena she was on her own financially about 10 minutes before discovering she's been our family's primary income source. I feel like an idiot, Dad said, but I could hear him starting to laugh too. You're not an idiot. You're a father who was trying to protect his children from financial uncertainty. You just didn't realize that one of those children had already solved the problem. My assistant knocked on my door again. Elena, your 5 p.m. board meeting is ready to begin. Should I reschedule? I looked at the time and realized I'd been on the phone with my family for over an hour. Give me 5 more minutes, then start without me. I'll join shortly. Mom, Dad, Diego, I said, I need to get back to work. But I want you to understand something important. This changes nothing about how I feel about any of you. I'm still your daughter and sister. I still want to spend holidays together and hear about your lives. The only difference is that now you know what I actually do for work. Elena, Dad said, his voice serious, what do you need from us going forward? Just be my family. Don't treat me differently because of the money or the company. And please don't feel guilty about accepting help. Taking care of people I love is one of the best parts of being successful. Can we tell people? Diego asked. I mean, when the IPO happens, this is going to be public information anyway. Once we go public, yes. Until then, I'd prefer to keep it within the immediate family. The media attention is going to be intense enough without adding family drama to the story. After we hung up, I sat in my office for a few more minutes, looking out at the San Francisco Bay and processing what had just happened. For 5 years, I'd maintained an elaborate fiction to protect my family's feelings and my own privacy. In the space of one afternoon, that entire structure had collapsed. But instead of feeling exposed or vulnerable, I felt relieved. The burden of secrecy had been heavier than I'd realized. Now I could share my actual work with people who cared about me, celebrate successes without hiding them, and stop pretending to be someone I wasn't. My phone buzzed with a text from Diego. Elena, I'm still processing everything, but I want you to know I'm incredibly proud of you. What you've built is amazing, and what you've done for our family is extraordinary. I love you. Similar messages came from Mom and Dad over the next few minutes, each expressing pride, gratitude, and apologies for not recognizing my achievements sooner. The board meeting ran until 7 p.m., covering final details of our acquisition strategy and IPO timeline. When I finally left the office, I drove home to my penthouse, the one my family now knew cost $4.2 million, and opened a bottle of wine to celebrate the end of 5 years of secrecy. 3 months later, I stood on the trading floor of Nasdaq, surrounded by my senior team and my family, watching Avalon Digital begin its first day as a public company. The stock opened at $47 per share, immediately valuing my stake at over $2.1 billion and making me the youngest Latina billionaire in history. Dad was there, wearing a suit I'd bought him for the occasion, tears of pride streaming down his face. Mom held my hand as we watched the stock price climb throughout the morning. Diego took photos of everything, documenting his sister's transformation from secret CEO to public billionaire. But the moment that mattered most came after the market closed, when we gathered for dinner at a restaurant I'd bought specifically for the celebration. As we raised our glasses for a toast, Dad looked at me with complete understanding and respect. To Elena, he said, who taught us that sometimes the people we love most are capable of things we never imagined. And who proved that taking care of family is the most important investment anyone can make. For the first time in 5 years, I could share my success completely with the people who mattered most. That was worth more than any valuation or bank balance. The trust fund was never really gone. It had just been waiting for the right moment to reveal who had been funding it all along.